It's exactly 4 in Radio Cairo. This is World of Info. And my name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. And today, as usual, as every Thursday, it's our time for this program, weekly program. And today is going to be the world of books. And as you know, the role of the games is that we are presenting 3 to 4 books every time. And every time we give you the advice, should we read the book, toss it, or skim it? And usually, I'm very biased and I usually always ask you to read this book. Today, as always, we are going to present 3 books. The books are, first one, Aziz al-Masri, the father of the revolutionaries, Abu Suwar, by Muhammad al-Sayyid Saleh. The second book is On the Line of Fire, Ala Khatt al-Nar, the diary of October War and the Attrition War by Kamal al-Ghitani. And the third book, A Poet's Mind, Selected Quotations by Tagore. And yes, 3 very interesting books, and as usual they are books from the north, the south, the east or the west, but always something that binds all these books is that they deserve to be read. We're going to start right away with Aziz al-Masri, Abu Suwar. It started as an ambitious plan by Muhammad Sayyid Saleh, who is a famous journalist, writer in Masr al-Yawm, and he has decided to write some articles about Aziz al-Masri. And for some time, he was unable to find a lot of sources. And as I was reading these articles in Masr al-Yawm 3 years back, I always found that there is something missing. And so when I found the book last 2 weeks ago, it was published in 2018, and I decided to get it on the spot and to read it. And I was very happy that Mr. Muhammad Sayyid Saleh did a lot of homework after writing these articles. He went on more investigations, he went on more search, and he found some references and books talking about this legendary man. When we talk about Aziz al-Masri, we have to give him the tribute of being a great nationalist. A man who has always, all through his life, presented the ideals, the nationalism, the love of Egypt and the love of the country, and became a symbol of nationalism for a lot of not only officers, but his fellow countrymen. So it is always stunning to find out that Aziz al-Masri doesn't have a lot of references. As regards what is left of the legacy of Aziz al-Masri, there are 2 schools called Aziz al-Masri, and as I know, and I've had the honor of visiting the Egyptian Military Academy, there is one of the big buildings in the Egyptian Military Academy carrying the name of Aziz al-Masri. So his name is in the hearts of every student or every military cadet who served or went to the Egyptian Military Academy. He knows by heart the name of Aziz al-Masri. So I bet to differ with Mr. Muhammad Sayyid Saleh when he says that not a lot of people have information about Aziz al-Masri, but it is enough that his name, when you are, for example, a military cadet and living in a building that carries the name of Aziz al-Masri, his name, or you're walking by this building every day, then his name is going to be always in your memory and in your collective memory, and you'll always remember that this was an eminent chief of staff of the Egyptian army in 1939. But is this the only true fact about Aziz al-Masri? Actually not. Aziz al-Masri came from a well-off family. His mother was of Turkish origins, that her cousins are living in Istanbul, and his father was an Egyptian, not very well-off man, but he was almost from the middle class. And his sisters got married. His elder sister got married to one of the famous employees in Egypt, a Basha, and so he came actually from a well-off family. His father died when he was 10 years old, and his mother, with her ambitions for such a short little boy, were great, and her expectations were very high. He wanted to go to the military academy, and his brother-in-law said, no, you should go to the faculty of law. and he went there actually for 1 year, but he applied for the Egyptian Military Academy, and he was turned out because his short stature. However, his mother said, okay, I'm going to give you your wish, and actually this is what happened. She sent him to Istanbul, where he enrolled in the Turkish Military Academy in the 19th century. He was able to graduate, and there was a famous thing in the Ottoman Empire, is that it was welcoming the distinguished members and nationals of different countries, as they say that the whole of the Islamic world was belonging to the Ottomans, and therefore any person can be a member of the elite, can be a member in the Turkish or the Ottoman armed forces, and he can get promoted. Yes, of course, this is not 100% true. They were given the ranks of officers, but probably they didn't reach very high ranks. Anyway, Aziz al-Masri enrolled in the Ottoman army, and he has, as a young officer, and he has shown great military talent and great military enlightenment and intelligence, and he shared in crushing a lot of mutinies in the Ottoman Empire, and he took an important role in the Yemen, in the uprising that happened in the Yemen, and leading negotiations between the Ottoman garrison over there and the Yemeni imam, and of course it ended up with a peace accord, and therefore he saved a lot of lives and souls of both parties. He also shared and took an important part in the Italian invasion of Libya, where he was one of the members of the expeditionary force, the Ottoman forces that were used to try to fight the Italians. Mostly successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully other times, and then they were forced to retreat, and he was the last of the Ottomans to retreat from Libya, and he has done very well over there. However, when he came back to Istanbul, there was a famous commander, and at that time he was having very great jealousy with Aziz al-Masri, and he ordered that he should be court-martialed for misconduct and misbehavior in the Libyan expedition, and this was totally untrue. Anwar, his name was, a man who proved by time that he was a traitor and a soldier of his own ambitions, wanted to court-martial him and wanted him to be condemned to death. And actually the court-martial decided that he should be condemned for high treason for death, and of course this was totally untrue. There was, of course, a lot of work against this injustice, and a lot of pressure, especially from the Egyptians and from even the British and from everyone who had a liberal thought and belief in the innocence of Aziz al-Masri. And actually he was given the pardon from the Sultan, and was instructed to leave Istanbul on the spot. He wanted to go to Egypt, and he received a hero welcome in Egypt, and when he went there to Egypt, he was received very generously by the Egyptians, who considered him to be a champion of a just cause. As the First World War happened, and Aziz al-Masri had a strong belief that the Arab world should have its own independence from the Ottomans, and that all the countries of the Arab world should unite in a new Arab empire. And therefore he joined forces with Sharif Hussein and, of course, the famous Lawrence of Arabia, and the British activities that happened. But he was having a strong intelligence, wit and charm, and of course strong strategy, understanding, and he knew from the circumstances that were happening that the British are not going to give the Arabs a real independence, that they are going to replace the Ottomans in the region. They are not going to give Egyptians really what they intend to do. They're simply going to deny them any independence. So he had his rift between him and Sharif Hussein, in spite of being the chief of the staff of the newly formed Arab army. And he had also a rift with the British, because he understood quite well that they are only after their own interests, and so were going to be the French. So in 1916 he returned to Egypt, and then he was forced into exile in Spain. When he traveled to Spain, he joined with a very famous poet, the prince of all poets, as he's called, Ahmad Shawqi, who befriended him. He knew him before he traveled, and he was the one who has written a beautiful poem in support of Aziz al-Masri when he was imprisoned in Istanbul. And they went around Spain and seen the Andalusia and became really good friends. After that, Aziz al-Masri went to Germany, where he stayed there teaching in the staff college, and worked for some time until World War I ended, and stayed in exile till the early 20s in Germany and in Europe, until he was given the chance to come back to Egypt. When he came back to Egypt, he met Saad Zaghloul, and Saad Zaghloul was also fond of him. He tried to offer him a job, and actually he was offered the job of being the commander of the police academy. And in the police academy, Aziz al-Masri proved himself as a distinguished officer, a teacher, and an educator, and has given the cadets a real proper law education and police work education. And he attracted the attention of King Fuad. And King Fuad, after a visit to the police academy, admired the Aziz al-Masri very much, and decided that he is going to involve him in becoming a sort of a guide to his son, Crown Prince Farouk, him and of course Ahmad Basha Hassanin. So as Farouk was heading in 1935 for proper education in Britain, there he had two tutors. These were Aziz al-Masri as regards disciplinary work and military teaching, and Ahmad Basha Hassanin with his British education, British accent, and a great excavator and great explorer of the whole dust and desert, a man with a lot of charm, intelligence. And both of them, of course, being on the extreme side of civil life and military life, had, of course, a great fight in which Ahmad Hassanin won. And the premature death of King Fuad, after he succumbed to ill health, ended the scholarship of King Farouk, and he was forced to return, the Crown Prince, to get on the throne. He really liked Aziz al-Masri, but he was not very fond of his strict military behavior. So Aziz al-Masri came to Egypt with the rank of a Major General and the rank of a Basha, but receiving a salary with no work. For some time, in 1938, he was given the chance to become an Inspector General of the Egyptian Army, and then later on became the Chief of Staff of the Egyptian Army for a very short while, during which he started to organize things, make the army as trying to bring the military education, tried to get weapons, and of course this was not very much interested to the British forces, and especially with the entrance of the war. And his German background and his German work, his work in German Military Academy, in the Staff College of the Military Academy in the World War I, and in the military and in the years to follow in Germany, all this ended up by the fact that he was relieved from his job, and he was forced almost like house arrest. However, Aziz al-Masri had the interest in order to fight the British, He had the idea of joining forces with the Germans, going and meeting Rommel and Hitler and trying to convince them to force the British out of Egypt and to work with them in order to have an independent Egypt. He tried through a failed flight attempt to reach the German forces through going to Lebanon, and then from Lebanon he would go to German side or to Vichy forces in Syria. Or in the beginning, the first trial was to meet up with a German aeroplane in the Western Desert, but his car failed. So these two failures ended up, especially after his plane was forced to do forced landing, that he was subjected to arrest, stayed waiting court-martial for some time, and then he was released and given a pardon from the king and from the prime minister, then Mustafa Nahas. So Aziz al-Masri now living at his home, having nothing to do actually, and always kept under the eye of the intelligence, or whether this was Egyptian intelligence or British intelligence, but yet he was approached by the liberal officers in the form of Gamal Abdel Nasser and Anwar al-Sadat, and they even offered him to become the godfather and the commander instead of Muhammad Naguib. He said to them, I am pretty old to do this. This is a great honor, but I am reaching a very old age, and I don't think that I will be of great help to you, especially that I've been out of the service for quite a long time. So they offered him some names, and he said them to pick Muhammad Naguib for having a very clean slate and a very white background. So afterwards, Aziz al-Masri, after the revolution and Muhammad Naguib went to power, so Aziz al-Masri as a Democrat, and he was giving the advice to Nasser and his colleagues that they should not stay in power as the army, and the army should stay in the barracks, and that the young officers should stay young officers. They shouldn't be having very high-ranking promotions depending on their rank in the supreme command of the liberal officers. Of course, this was not very much admired at that time, and there was a decision that was made to send Aziz al-Masri as an ambassador, a distinguished ambassador in Moscow. Of course, this was very strange because of the Aziz al-Masri being anti-communist and, of course, more pro to German to go there as an ambassador. However, when he went there, he studied very much the communism, and he studied the hierarchy in the Soviet Union, and he has returned with a lot of good ideas of supplying the Egyptian army by Russian or by Soviet armors, and trying to make a plan to attract the attention of Nasser to get his military supplies from Moscow. He didn't stay quite well, very much in Moscow, and he returned for retirement in Egypt afterwards. He was almost in his early 70s in 1956 war, and then, of course, he died in 1965 at the age of almost 90. Aziz al-Masri received a full tribunal military funeral that was led by President Nasser himself, and they all considered him to be a godfather of the revolutionaries. A man with such great talent, a man who has served his country so well, and a real nationalist who always stayed young in heart and dedicated all his life for Egypt. He had a very short-term marriage, and from this marriage he had one son, and she was an American lady, and his son was named Omar, who immigrated with his mother after the divorce in the 30s and came back in the early 60s to visit his father for a short visit. Aziz Masri remains in the hearts of Egyptians as a symbol of purity, as a symbol of nationalism, as a man who is the son of his age. We cannot put a lot of blame on Aziz al-Masri for any act that he has done through his life. We have to look to him at the situations that he was put in, and we have to look to him as a man who believed in his country, a man who fought very hard for the establishment of a free Egypt, and gave up a symbol not only for his cadets, not only for his officers in the barracks, but he has shown that for the Egyptians, the whole sect of Egyptians. His belief in the greatness of this country and the well-being of Egypt, and his complete purity and honesty, not even having a single extra penny to support him in his old age, and yet he always kept his dignity and his self-respect till the last moment. So, Aziz al-Masri Abu Suwar, or Aziz al-Masri, the father of the revolutionaries, by Muhammad Sayyid Saleh, a book that deserves to be read, and a book that should give us the light on an important character in the Egyptian history. You're still listening to World of Info, and today is the World of Books, and my name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Stay with us after the break. You're still listening to the World of Info in this beautiful afternoon in Thursday, and we are coming from Radio Cairo Studio 3, and my name is Dr. Amr MABROUK, and today is the World of Books. This second book that we're going to present today is another beautiful book, and it's as usual a small historical book, but yet it has a lot of value, because this is a group of articles written by the distinguished writer Gamal Ghitani. Gamal Ghitani is one of the great writers of novels in Egypt, and he was a man who came out from Cairo and lived all his life in Cairo, loved Cairo. He used to go around the streets of Cairo, of old Cairo, presenting one of the most beautiful programs in the Egyptian TV, showing the glory and the glimpses of glory of the Islamic architecture in Cairo, especially in Mu'izz al-Din Street. He also has written a beautiful novels that were related to the Mamluks times and to beautiful historical purviews and previews of Egypt. He started his career as a journalist, and his first assignments was as a military correspondent, and military correspondent in such very hard times of life in 1967 onwards till the end of 1973 war. And this book is the form of aggregation of a lot of his articles that were published at that time and at that period in particular, and has shown his activities, has shown his dedication, and has shown his camaraderie with the Egyptian army, whether these were soldiers or officers who were defeated but still carried a lot of pride. They were defeated in 1967, and they felt that they should go back and have their own revenge. They maintained their integrity, they maintained their dignity, and they had the support of the whole of the country. And this great army and this great perspective was shown in the work of almost daily or weekly articles that were written by Gamal Ghitani about different soldiers and about different acts. And it has a beautiful introduction that was written by the son of Gamal Ghitani, who is now working as a diplomat and an ambassador of Egypt in one of the countries, and he had received a very good education from his father, and also at the same time he was taught the love of this country, and he was always accompanying his father in his visits as a young lad, going and visiting the distinguished officers who after the war, almost all of them retired, and yet he kept Gamal Ghitani contact with them. He always went and visited them and always stayed with them. So Gamal Ghitani, in this beautiful collection of articles, has given us as Egyptians some points of view touching the hearts of the Egyptians. For example, he was giving us the sort of some things that we never knew that they really existed. We all had the impression in 1967 and afterwards that Egypt was able to sink 2 submarines that belonged to Israel. And Israel never found these submarines, and their destruction was sure, but they never found the submarines or their crew. And the Egyptians didn't admit 100% because they didn't see the oil spots of this submarine. But later on, after the Accords of Camp David, Israel was granted a permission to search in vain for the wreckage of this submarine, which is most probably after drowned or after it sank, it was pushed away by the different currents in the Mediterranean, and nobody was able to find the wreckage of this submarine, and it's called Dakar. And of course, he has written specially about the air defense. The Egyptian air defense has proved its role, especially in the 30th of June of 1970. In this particular day, the Egyptian air defense was reached the peak of its performance and was able to down a lot of Israeli aeroplanes on that day. And on that particular day, it was decided that the 30th of June will be the anniversary and the day of the air defense. At that time, the commander-in-chief of the air defense was the famous General Muhammad Ali Fahmi, who later on became the chief of the Egyptian armed staffs, and a man who has proved all his life how dedicated he is and how potent he was in serving his country. Also, the book has shown the great activities that the Egyptians have done in the very small sect that left under the Egyptian control in Sinai near Bor Fuad, where the Egyptian commandos stood in front of and being outnumbered by an attacking column of armored brigade, and yet they were able to defend this small part of Sinai and keeping it intact in the hands of the Egyptian army. And also he has given us an example of how the Egyptians were living, even refusing to be forced to immigrate to the delta, and have chosen to stay in Suez, Ismailia and Port Said, taking care of their business and also taking care of the armed forces who were there. And of course, the role of these civilians in maintaining the strength of the defense and the resistance in Suez has proved a great important role. They defended Suez with the Egyptian army, and Israeli forces were never allowed in Suez. And the personal strength of this joint forces of the Egyptians and the Egyptian resistance and the Egyptian army has proved a great and important vital role. Reading such books about that were written almost 50 or 55 years ago, yet they are very important for the youngsters of today, for the Egyptians of today, to understand how the Egyptian army fared in periods of stress, and how the Egyptian people decided that they are going to stay, that they're going to fight, and how simple words that cannot be touched, like dignity and integrity, are really more important than a lot of the material things in life. In the memory of Gamal Ghitani, a great Egyptian military correspondent, and the memory of all the Egyptians who fought and stood the test of time. This book is dedicated At the Line of Fire, The Diary of October War by Gamal Ghitani, a book that deserves to be read. You're still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books. My name is Dr. Amr MABROuk, and I'm with you here until 5 in this beautiful Thursday afternoon. We have presented up till now 2 books that deserve to be read. Aziz al-Masri, Abu Suwar by Muhammad Sayyid Saleh. Aziz al-Masri, the father of the revolutionaries. على خط النار يوميات حرب أكتوبر, that is On the Line of Fire, The Diary of October War by Gamal Ghitani. And the third and final book of today is Food for Thought. And yes, it's called A Poet's Mind. And these are selected quotations of Tagore. And yes, Tagore was one of the most or the greatest minds of the whole world. And he was a poet, a philosopher, songwriter, playwright, painter, novelist, writer, essayist, educationist, and a Nobel laureate. Tagore has impacted the thoughts of many as a person, both in his lifetime and afterwards. Known as a writer primarily in his native Bengal in the early years of his life, he eventually became a literary figure of great repute throughout India and the world. The youngest son of Debendranath Tagore, he was born in Calcutta into a wealthy Brahmin family on May 1861. He was educated at home, and although he was sent to England for formal schooling at the age of 17, he didn't complete his studies and returned to Calcutta, concentrating on his literary career and managing the family estates, which brought him close to people and social issues, sparking his interest in social reforms. He became a world figure when in 1912 he himself translated into English his book of poems, Gitangli, which when published instantly took the literary world by storm. Tagore received the Nobel Prize for this book in 1913 because of his profoundly sensitive, fresh, and beautiful verse, by which, with consummate skill, he has made his poetic thoughts, expressed in his own English words, a part of the literature of the West. He was the first non-Westerner to receive the Nobel Prize, as Tagore's fame grew in the world. He was often invited in both lecture tours and friendship tours. He was also knighted in 1915, but returned it as a protest after the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy in 1919. At that time, the country was in the throes of nationalism, and Tagore wrote songs and novels, some of which were inspiring, while others showed the negative side of nationalism. Although close to Gandhi, Tagore steered clear of active politics and instead believed in promoting spiritual values, multiculturalism, and tolerance. Tagore, who had become a legend by then for India and Bengal, stood as a symbol of inspiration and encouragement for the world. A prolific writer, his work reflected great sensitivity, mysticism, and stunning choice of words and imagery. While he wrote primarily in Bengali after the success of his first book, he translated many of his works into English. His output was considerable, some 1,000 poems, 8 volumes of short stories and 8 novels, 2,000 songs and their music, an impressive number of plays and dramas and essays on philosophy, religion, and social issues. Some of his famous works are The Ideal One, The Golden Boat, Song Offerings, Breath of Songs, Flight of Cranes, The King of the Dark Chamber, The Post Office, The Immovable, The Waterfall, and The Red Orlanders. A host of others added to these are his sketches and paintings and the music that he set for his own songs. In 1901, Tagore established a school which later flowered into university. the Bharat University in West Bengal. It combined the best of traditional Hindu thoughts and modern and scientific Western principles. His earnings from his writings and lectures tours funded this educational institute. A child of the East and the West, Tagore was a wonderful fusion of Western and Eastern souls. Science, culture, tradition, modernity and literature. His taped conversations with Einstein and Wells are proof of this. This book of quotations has been divided into 3 sections: life, love, and motivation, and it gives us a glimpse into the mind of this creative genius. The quotations range from 2 or 3 lines to 8 or 9 lines, and in some instances, short poems have been given. The profundity of his thoughts is both simple and complex. While the meaning behind some quotations is easily understood, some sayings need greater depth of understanding and feeling, and the philosophical leaning of his thoughts can be seen in quotations from all these 3 sections. The sayings in the life section makes us reflect and ponder on life in a manner that we may perhaps have felt but never realized, while those in the motivation section will never fail to inspire, and those in the love sections are not necessarily addressed to a loved one, but can be meant for the Almighty as well. These quotes from Tagore can be used as conversation as well as to ponder and reflect upon quietly in the attempt to understand life mysteries. And the more we read about these quotations, you will understand that how really this mind of Tagore was able to build on a lot of things. And so we are going to give some of his thoughts about life, love, and more motivation through this book about Tagore. And in life he said, "Clouds come floating into my life no longer to carry rain or usher storm, but to add color to my sunset sky." Death is not extinguishing the light, it is only putting out the lamp, because the dawn has come. Depth of friendship doesn't depend on the length of acquaintance. Don't limit a child to your own learning, for he was born in other times. Facts are many, but the truth is one. Everything that comes to us, that belongs to us, if we create the capacity to receive it. If you shut the doors to all errors, truth will be shut out. Life is given to us. We earn it by giving it. The butterfly counts not months, but moments, and it has time enough. The highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. The world suffers most from the disinterested tyranny of its well-wisher. We gain freedom when we have paid the full price for our right to live. A river in the sea work finds its fulfillment in the depth of leisure. These words that have proved the wisdom of Tagore really gives us an interest of how his mind was working and how he was able to see and feel things like we feel, and yet he was able to put these in words. One of his final quotations said, "When death comes and whispers to me, 'Thy days are ended,' let me say to him, 'I have lived in love and not in mere time. He will ask, will thy songs remain? I shall say, I know not, but this is I know, that often when I sang, I found my eternity. The flower sheds all its petals and find the fruit. The great belief in the afterlife and the fact that life will not just end by death is one of the most important motivations that you can get from such thoughts and ideas of Tagore. And about some love quotations, let's listen to some of them. Love is an endless mystery, for it has nothing else to explain it. The shade of my tree is for passers-by, its fruit for the one for whom I wait. Your smile, my love, like the smell of strange flower, is simple and inexplicable. Love does not claim possession, but gives freedom. Love's gift cannot be given, it waits to be accepted. We live in the world when we love it. Only love is motion and rest in one. Loves give beauty to everything it touches. Love is not a mere impulse, it must contain truth, which is love. I came to offer thee a flower, but thou must have all my garden. And we leave you after that with the motivation part. The words of motivation are really inspirational, and at the same time, they give a lot of optimism. The sun greets me with a smile. The rain, her sad sister, talks to my heart. I shall rush from peak to peak. I shall sweep from mount to mount. With peals of laughter and songs of murmur, I shall clap to tune and rhythm. I have become my own version of an optimist. If I can't make it through one door, I'll go through another door, or I'll make another door. Something terrific will come, no matter how dark the present. If you cry because the sun has gone out of your life, your tears will prevent you from seeing the stars. The mountain remains unmoved at its seeming defeat by the mist. And last but not least, let me light my lamp, says the star, and never debate if it will help to remove the darkness. Never debate if it will help to remove the darkness. The words of Tagore are nothing better than this to finish the program of today about the world of books and the world of info. Today we presented 3 books about optimism, about Aziz al-Masri, who has given up his life and his struggle for his country, about On the Line of Fire, about the youngsters of the 60s and the 70s who fought hard for integrity and dignity and self-respect, and the work of Tagore, the poet's mind, the man who has really fought very hard to convey to us the message of love and optimism. This was World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. I promise to come back next Thursday, same time, same station, and hope that you will be always there with me. Thank you very much.